Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad you could join us today. Welcome to the webinar. Actually, I see we have a few more people coming in. Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here with us today to learn more about and go deeper with the Mass Literacy Guide. I'm Donna Goldstein, an ELA Literacy Content Lead at DESE. Mass Literacy Getting Started is a series of 6 sessions to support users in accessing specific parts of the Mass Literacy Guide. Each session will feature experienced educators speaking to their use of evidence-based practices and connecting this work to the Mass Literacy Guide. Today's focus area is around engaging with complex text, which is addressed in 2 key areas of the Mass Literacy Guide. Subsequent sessions will focus on other areas, including fluent word reading, language comprehension, students experiencing reading difficulties, and leading a multi-tiered system of supports. A link to a central doc with registration for the upcoming sessions and all of the resources being shown today is being dropped in the chat for you right now. As you know, this session is being recorded. A video of this session will be posted to the Mass Literacy Guide. A video of this session will be posted to the Mass Literacy Guide site under the top resources section within a week or so. So you'll be able to access that whenever you want. As a matter of fact, last week's session, the February 25th Foundational Skills session is already posted. If you have a question today, please use the Q&A feature. We will be monitoring that. And while we will not be able to get to all of your questions, we will try to respond to as many as possible. A page with a sequential list of all the resource titles and links referenced in today's presentation, including the top resources section where the video will be posted, was just dropped into the chat, so they're easily accessible to you. And please remember, the recording of the session will be posted in a week or so. Our time for today's session will include a brief introduction and overview of today's focus areas, while most of the time will be for our featured speaker, Jen Traverso. After Jen presents, we will have some Q&A time moderated by my DESE colleague, Susan Kazeroid. For those of you who are new to the Mass Literacy Guide, it is a statewide effort to empower educators with the evidence-based practices for literacy that all students need. Evidence-based instruction provided within schools and classrooms that are culturally responsive and sustaining will put our youngest students on a path toward literacy for life. As part of this work, over the next several years, DESE will offer early literacy programming paired with implementation supports, including resources, professional development, and grants. Here is the Mass Literacy landing page. We have a great video which acts as the centerpiece of the landing page, featuring classroom teachers, specialists, and a couple of the researchers who advised on this work. Many voices, perspectives, and areas of expertise contributed. The featured speakers in this video were among the 100+ stakeholders who advised. We engaged with research advisors from across the country and even internationally, along with Massachusetts preschool and elementary teachers, administrators, and education preparation faculty. DESE also partnered with the Massachusetts Reading Association and collaborated with the Mass Association of School Administrators, working with a group of assistant superintendents. You can see the Mass Reading Association logo at the bottom right of the landing page here. So the design of the Mass Literacy Guide. It is made up of 5 primary sections: components of the core literacy block, skills for early reading, students experiencing reading difficulties, leading a multi-tiered system of support, and pathway to equity in early literacy. And you can navigate around using these tiles, or you can also use all of the links at the left-hand navigation. As mentioned during the welcome, Today's session focuses on engaging with complex text, and this connects directly to the components of the core literacy block, where you see indicated with this red arrow, and skills for early reading, which is also highlighted with that red arrow. Our feature speaker, Jen Traverso, the K-2 Humanities Curriculum Coordinator in Westfield Public Schools, will be sharing her experience using evidence-based instruction around complex text in just a few minutes. Let's take a closer look at the two main areas that support engaging with complex text. First, here in the components of the core literacy block. This section identifies the components that should be included in literacy instruction in pre-K to 3. And as you can see from the colored segments on this graphic, the core literacy block has three main components: foundational skills, engaging with complex text, writing. A fourth component, or a language down here in the light blue chevron stripe, is embedded throughout the literacy block to develop all three of the top components you see in the graphic. This entire section is geared toward teachers and administrators, just like many of you with us today. Educators looking for evidence-based information and resources related to the core literacy block. Today, part of our focused work is in the components of the core literacy block at a few specific sections: choosing and using complex text, reading for understanding, oral language, and also differentiated instruction. And differentiated instruction is indicated by the kidney table or the teacher table that is down in the lower right-hand corner. Engaging with complex text also involves part of the skills for early reading section. This section identifies the skills that contribute to early reading proficiency and is organized around the simple view of reading, a cognitively based theory, which asserts that to learn to read, children must develop both fluent word reading and language comprehension. These two factors, fluent word reading and language comprehension, account for the variance in reading ability in young children. And the theory is held up in many studies. Some of the practices to support engaging with complex text that Jen will discuss today are also supported in the Math Literacy Guide here under Knowledge, and Jen will also briefly touch upon the simple view of reading in her remarks. So with that context in mind, let's get ready to meet our featured speaker. We're really pleased to have Jen Traverso join us today to share about her evidence-based practice around engaging with complex text. Jen has been an educator for 26 years and is currently the K-2 Humanities Curriculum Coordinator in Westford Public Schools. Jen teaches at the graduate level and has been a classroom teacher, a K-5 English Language Arts Coordinator, reading specialist, Title I director, and a literacy coach in districts throughout Massachusetts. She has also served as a literacy champion, one of about 50 educators, primarily teachers and some administrators, from across the Commonwealth that were deeply involved in advising DESE about the Math Literacy Guide. Jen has been a Reading First facilitator for DESE and was part of the group that advised DESE in regard to the new dyslexia legislation. She has so much to share with us today, and we truly value her time and her expertise. Jen, excuse me, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and invite you to share yours and to welcome you. We really appreciate your being here today. And you're still on mute, Jen.
Okay, so I am unmuted and my screen is shared. Yes? Okay, always good to double check in this day and age. Okay, so before I begin, I just want to, I don't know that we could ever say it enough, is to thank people for the endless hours and days of work that people have done this year, for the 100th millionth time that you've picked yourself up from the bootstraps, because everything has changed perpetually. So I don't think it's said enough, but I honor and thank you for all of the work that you have done. Every minute makes a difference. So thank you. Okay. So let's begin to discuss high quality discussions of complex text. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the last presenter, Lisa, she did such a beautiful job. And when I was watching her presentation, I loved that she had clean, neat, pretty slides of all the books she's dove into to help develop her understanding and thinking around foundational skills. And I was planning this presentation at my dining room table, and I looked up and I thought, what books am I going to highlight? And so I realized that here are the books that I'm highlighting. Now, you can't see all the books in these piles, right? So we're talking about complex texts. Well, literacy is complex. And so there's piles upon piles. And I wish I could give you the one book that will give you all the answers. There isn't one. And so here are some of the books that I'm using. And so I just thought it would give you a little chuckle, but life is complex, and especially literacy. So again, we're in the Math Literacy Guide, and I wanted to guide you carefully in that we are looking at the components of the core literacy block. Okay. So I love the simple view of reading. I think it makes a lot of sense. Here, I just wanted to highlight for a minute. So last session, Lisa talked about those foundational skills, right? The decoding piece. And so without the decoding piece being in play and solid, right? This is a multiplication problem. Multiply it times good language comprehension, you don't have any reading comprehension, right? So those foundational skills are critical. Today, we're going to be talking about the different pathway. So today we're not really going to be talking as much about decoding and word recognition. We're going to talk about that oral language comprehension, and that is where it engages with complex text. So this is another critical component, and both areas have to be taught simultaneously, right? I like things neat and clean in little boxes, and I want to say, okay, you teach a decoding check, and then you teach reading comprehension check, but we need to be teaching decoding and oral language comprehension at the same time at the primary level, because our youngest readers who are developing here don't have the ability to read really nice, rich, complex texts yet. So we need to be building this oral language comprehension. So if we're not teaching and building this, then comprehension is going to be hindered. So we're going for the 1 times 1 equals 1, right? Building oral language comprehension, building those foundational skills to get the print off the page with the goal of reading comprehension. So this piece is directly tied and connected to oral language. So I think this is one of the most important parts of, it's also good and important, but the importance of teaching and supporting and scaffolding oral language in support of all these other components can't be overstated. So I wanted to make sure we notice that. And I'm showing you again how important oral language is. And we were discussing this, and I love this. It's the bedrock of literacy, okay? It's not just important, it's the bedrock, okay? Through all of the components. So my presentation isn't just about oral language today, and it isn't just about complex text. It's about where these intersect and how we're going to use complex texts to build the oral language to eventually get us to the place where children can apply those skills for comprehension. So here we are in the page for components of the literacy block, and we're just going to dig in a little deep about choosing and using complex texts. So as a learner, okay, I come about things in a really intense way. So everything we talk about today in this work, I'm thinking about as an interventionist. I'm thinking about as a classroom teacher, and I'm thinking about as a curriculum coordinator. How are all these pieces going to interplay? So I'm going to share some of the thinking that we're doing in Westford, and I'm planning ahead. So right now we're part of the early literacy grant, and we just spent a ton of time learning about David Kilpatrick and his research and work. We're working with Melissa Orkin now. And so eventually we're going to get to the place where we're diving in deep about how to support language comprehension. So some of the work and tools that I'm going to share with you today are ones that I am planning and thinking about using for our future. So my first question is, I want to help teachers understand and know what makes a text complex and how do we choose good complex text. So here are some tools that I found helpful on the Mass Literacy Guide to begin to frame my thinking and think about how am I as an interventionist going to choose complex texts? How am I going to use it in small group? How am I going to help my teachers think about this topic? So the main framework that I'm speaking from is this IES report by Shanahan et al., or the researchers. This is what the practice guide looks like. So if you're not familiar with the IES practice guides, that could be a great takeaway from today. They're fantastic. They're on a range of areas, and they really do a nice job of compiling the research in a really teacher-friendly way, right? Research can get a little dense, but this kind of condenses it for us and lets us know what are the most well-researched evidence-based practices, what are some some problems that you might encounter, and how can we overcome that? So I can't support it enough. So we're going to be talking about recommendation 4, which is selecting texts to purposely support comprehension, right? So coming around again, like which texts are complex? How do we begin that work? So from that IES guide, this is directly taken from there. They're talking about 4 factors for successful discussions, okay? And the first 2 are teacher planning factors. So how do we select text to spark discussion? And then later on in our talk, we'll be talking about how to create discussion guides with higher order questions, right? So it's just like that clip from that show that we shouldn't say out loud, but it's folding in the cheese, right? So for me, it's always like, okay, this is what we should be doing. How do we do it? How do we apply it? So this is from the guide. So our job is, so the recommendation is use texts that support the purpose of instruction. Well, yeah, that makes sense, right? That's not brand new to us. But our job is to make sure that, you know, depending on our purpose, that's going to guide what kind of text that we choose. So if we're giving a lesson on text structure, so we're teaching text structure. It'd be nice if there's some content in there that will build students' background knowledge, but our goal is to help children understand text structure. So we begin with a text about a familiar topic, right? But if we're introducing students to a strategy like summarizing, we want to make sure it's a nice, clean, clear way, easy breezy, so they can see how the process works. There's some other factors here, but I really wanted to highlight reading with students with a big book, right? So we are going to be reading with students. We want to pick a book that's just above where their level is. So one of the things that I learned, I worked with Melissa Orkin a few summers ago, and we talked about texts and supersets. Now I'm going to bungle my way through this explanation because I can't tell you the last time I worked out in the gym. It has nothing to do with COVID. There's this thing in the workout world that when you're building muscle, you want to do supersets, right? So some of the weights you're going to use are weights that you use a lot and use lots of repetitions. Okay, so that's what this is speaking to. Okay, just above the student's level, you're just like maintaining the muscle mass that you have. And then sometimes when we want to really dive in, right? So maybe you want to really push your muscle, move to the next level, you're going to choose a book for students. So a weight, you would pick a heavier weight to push yourself to a higher level. For our students, we're going to, for read alouds, and I can't say this enough, we want teachers choosing texts, right? Your listening comprehension is 2 grade levels above your reading comprehension. So we want to make sure that we're exposing children, they can hear much more complex than they're able to decode on their own, okay? And this is that critical aspect that's going to build language comprehension in oral language through exposure of really rich vocabulary and different sentence structures, okay? So when we're thinking about engaging with complex text, so you say, okay, so we have some complex text. How are we going to make this work for students? Okay, So we're going to talk about reading for understanding. How are we going to build that? So text is at the center of our work. And so this is from Achieve the Core. A lot of the resources I'm sharing today are from Achieve the Core. They have some great tools to help us. So here's a short guide to placing text at the center of the learning. And this is a longer document, but I just chose this to highlight, okay? So for our whole class instruction, we want rich grade level complex texts and discussion rich close reading lessons multiple times a week, okay? So we want meaty discussions and tasks that are working on questioning and unpacking the richness of texts. And here are some more links that will help support us. And I'm going to highlight a few in a minute. So this is speaking to do more, stop doing this. So this is talking about having kids at the primary level. We're going to be reading aloud to kids. We're going to expose them to rich texts to help them develop that listening and reading language comprehension. So I put a little sample in, right? So they're talking about sometimes this kind of merges with close reading. And so I thought this was just a cute little sentence as an example. This is a very simple book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. But look at this one sentence. We could spend quite a long time with kindergarten students talking about this sentence. You know, read it and enjoy it and listen to it, right? As educators, we have great strength in being able to read with prosody, engage our readers. So why did the little egg lay on a leaf? Why did the author choose the word lay, right? What were some other words that the author could use? And how does that change our thinking about the egg? Or why did the author say in the light of the moon, not just the moon was lit, right? So you can dive in and think about complexity even at the sentence level, which is very approachable for our youngest learners. So this is Donna spoke earlier that, you know, these are going to intersect in lots of different places. So in regard to language comprehension, right, we're going to talk about these all just merged together. Achieve the core, right? So I'm always thinking about how can I support my teachers that might need to learn more about this? So Achieve the Core has a read aloud project, and this is PD for teachers. So it's supposed to be like a 2-day PD, but you can, you know, jump in and jump out as you need if this is something that you need to do. And so I just wanted to offer that this is a great tool. I'm going to investigate more deeply to see how it can support my teachers in the work as we move forward. And so this work is hard and complex. And so I think to myself, when are my teachers going to have the time to really dive in deep and look at a complex text and analyze it in a way that's going to allow them and enable them to use the language and the structure to teach it well? So here's the great news for us all. On Achieve the Core for this Read Aloud project, they have 133 high complex texts, read alouds. It tells you why the text, the features of the text, what makes it complex. It walks you through each text and talks about some points that you should hit home. So the first reading you're just going to do so the children can enjoy the literature, and then activities and scaffolds to support those discussions connected with complex texts. So this was one of my like, yes. So as the humanities coordinator, then I was skimming through and seeing which of these matches with our standards for Massachusetts for history and social sciences, so that we can harvest those and begin to incorporate those into our work as well. So which leads us to our next topic, right? So in our world today, we have so many things happening, and we have, you know, it feels like less and less time and more things that we need to accomplish in an academic school day. So when we're using complex texts, we also are building knowledge for our students, and background knowledge is a critical component of comprehension. If you know something about the topic before you begin to read it, it's going to deepen your understanding and allow you to remember what you've read. Okay. So again, Achieve this core has text sets already made for us, ready to go. So I just wanted to highlight these for you because I think they're incredibly powerful. And again, here's another PD opportunity for building world knowledge. And it's an on-demand PD module that if this is an area that you want to learn more about and deepen your understanding, a great tool for you. Okay, so now I'm going to look a little more deeply at how the Mass Department of Ed is classifying and our state standards are classifying complex texts. They're in the reference guide, which we'll look at next, and also in ELA frameworks. So this is a quick reference guide. I just kind of pulled the pieces off that I thought would be most helpful in this discussion and the work that we're doing today, right? So if we're thinking about literary texts, what makes them complex are multiple layers of meaning, a few different narrators, that varied sentence structure. They're not predictable. There's shifts in time and place, and some reliance on cultural experiences, right? Just to ground your thinking. And then informational texts could be about abstract ideas. They have different ways of structuring themselves. I love teaching this to kids, the graphic features in a nonfiction text. Like, you're supposed to read those too. They add to your knowledge base. And then that vocabulary piece. So this is from the quick reference guide. And then these are from the appendices from the state standards. And I have to say, as I was exploring it a little more deeply, these are the K-1 text exemplars. Little House in the Big Woods, right? That feels really complex for K-1. Mm-hmm. And the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. So I just thought you might find it interesting that they're listing these are just some samples that this is what state of Massachusetts considers complex text. Here's the 2 to 3 exemplars. Cricket in Times Square, Bud Not Buddy, right? I've read that with 5th graders. Story of Ruby Bridges. So I think it's interesting as some examples. So the next recommendation that the IES practice guide shares is, okay, so now we've chosen our text, all right? We understand what complex texts are. We have some great samples. We've chosen the text that we want to use and we have some purpose behind them. Now, how are we going to guide students with focused, high quality discussion around the meaning of these complex texts? So this is coming back to that guide, and I just made these slides from the IES guide. And the first one, we're teacher planning, but now we're hyper focusing on sustaining and expanding factors, right? And here's where we're really hitting the art of teaching. How do we sustain discussions with students and our scaffolding and teaching students to challenge and engage with each other, right? To lead to higher levels of thinking. And how do we expand those discussions? How do we scaffold it when it falls flat, right? And help students engage in this important hard work of thinking. I might be banging this drum too often, but I'm going again. So improving discussion skills improves language comprehension. Remember, here's our simple view of reading. These foundational skills are critical, but not enough, right? So we need to get kids engaged with discussion around text to get us to the place for when decoding is improved, they're able to access and comprehend the books that they read. So some of the categories of questions that the IES guide suggested we think about. And as I looked at them, I thought, oh, okay, well, locate and recall are really comfortable places, right? In the wheelhouse. Main idea in detail, story elements, and hopefully moving towards sentence level comprehension. I feel like that's really easy. Not easy for students, but it's something that we commonly teach and understand and know well. integrating and interpreting are a bit more complex. And so we're going to need some tools in our toolbox to help students understand how to begin to do this deeper thinking and work, right? By critiquing and evaluating, monitor your thinking, judging an explanation that an author provides, considering alternatives. It's pretty complex. This is another resource and tool on the Math Literacy Guide from the Hansen Initiative for Literacy and Language. I loved it. It was really a nice tool in the gradual release model of instruction. If you aren't clean and clear on that, on how do we scaffold this kind of learning for students, this is a phenomenal module ready to go on the Math Literacy Guide. So I wanted to make sure you see and knew about it. Creating engaging lesson plans. Who doesn't want to do that, right? And, you know, at the K-2 level, there's no magic wand. This is really intense, right? And so how we help students think about and learn and know and own these practices are by modeling as expert readers and thinkers and comprehend, right? So think alouds, maybe thinking about text structure or annotating a text. Developmentally at the K-2 level, students are beginning to understand and can develop empathy. So how do we use that to help students understand perspective within complex texts, right? Readers are thinkers. We're predicting. What do we think is going to happen next? Oh, I can confirm my prediction. Oh, I have to revise it. I was heading in the wrong track. And that's part of monitoring your comprehension. Also the ability to summarize, right? So that's a little lofty at the K-2 level. Summarizing doesn't formally begin in the standards until 4th grade, I believe. But retell is on the pathway to summarize, and interpreting texts and thinking about what authors wanted us to know after reading a text. And so we have to be really purposeful in our thinking, think alouds and modeling for students to scaffold their understanding and taking on of these complex texts. So at the K-2 level, maybe a lot of this work is going to be focusing in on sentences. So this is, again, from Achieve the Core. It's the Juicy Sentence Guidance, okay? So it's a document that kind of walks you through how to pull apart a sentence, look at it deeply, and maybe you're doing close reading of just sentences for students, okay? And really practicing the work at the smallest level to help them build and develop in the way that we want them to grow. The model that I gave for you with the Hungry Caterpillar is somewhat of an example of what this task is, but as a learner, I always want to read about it, and then I want to watch a video about it, and then I want to think about it, and then I want to talk to my friend about it. So I wanted to offer you a few different resources and tools that could help move your thinking along. So part of the work that we do as readers is I have this discussion with my colleagues all the time in the office because I'm a paper person, right? Like I need to have a text in my hand and I post-it flags over here and I have a highlighter and a pencil and a pen because I might want to write in pen and then highlight, right? So I'm perpetually marking up text to help me track my thinking, paraphrase in the margin, put a flag there so I can find it again. Even students at the youngest level can do this work. Even if they can't take the print off the page, if you're projecting the text and they have it in front of you and you're pointing to the words, they can annotate the text as you go along, okay? And these were just some cute think marks that I found that I thought were engaging. But, you know, let's teach kids at the earliest level, this is what readers and writers and thinkers do. We annotate text. The other thing that practice guide highlighted was the importance of really clear guidelines and anchor charts. So to help the teacher keep track and also for students, and incorporating pictures and symbols with these as often as you can to help those earliest readers, right? Because some of this they're not able to read. So maybe you would take, this is always where I would start, teach talk routines, okay? So first we have to teach kids how to make eye contact and show listeners or speakers that we're listening to them, right, at the youngest level. And then we have to teach kids how to agree and disagree with one another and tell why, right? Or add on to one another. This is building language comprehension. And it doesn't happen by snapping your fingers or overnight. It takes lots of modeling and thinking and purposeful planning on a teacher's part. So character analysis, supporting thinking with text. This work is all about thinking anchored in text. Okay, so as a teacher, what happened in the book that makes you think that, right? We're always bringing the children back to the text, using the text as the center of our work. And then if meaning is breaking down, what was going on here? I'm not sure. Okay. So we're going to dig a little more deeply about when we're engaging with this complex text, how are we going to really support and scaffold reading for understanding? Because that is the goal. Okay. So active discussions that develop comprehension and language. Dialogic reading is great. It's designed for parents. But this was a tool that I found on the Math Literacy Guide that I thought was especially helpful. I'm really concrete. I want tools right in my hand, and how do I do it? So I just wanted to show you where I access this resource, and I made it slide friendly. So I know this is a little on the small side, but it's about accountable talk. And on the Math Literacy Guide, it's all set for you to print out in beautiful color and use. And so these are some tools to help build the thinking, right? The deep thinking and conversation around text, okay? So revoicing, adding on to another's thinking, making an analogy, and specific examples. And again, here's another great resource from Achieve the Core. I'm thinking maybe they should slip me some money for all the advertisement I'm giving them, but we need to engage kids in rigorous reasoning, right? And give them and help them develop the ability to communicate their thinking around text. So this resource, once you get into this file, it talks about the academic word finder. So I know I'm not supposed to be talking about vocabulary, but how can you not talk about vocabulary when you're talking about complex texts? So if you don't know about the academic word finder, you can copy and paste any text into, this is at Achieve the Core, the academic word finder, and then you set it for your grade level, and academic word finder does all the work for you in finding the tiered vocabulary and which words are most important to teach. It's one of my favorite tools on Achieve the Core. It also talks about, there's some before, during, and after prompts for students to help them as you're engaging in the work on complex texts, teaching annotation, which I touched on briefly, making sure that we're modeling how to do that with students, thinking about different levels of questions. So we're in a discussion with our class. What do you as a teacher have in your toolbox to help bump up that conversation to a higher level? Okay. And it also talks about the importance of giving students time to write as they're thinking, right? And maybe at the primary level, it's draw, okay? So we read this book with you, boys and girls. I'm gonna give you 10 seconds, I'm sorry, maybe 30 seconds, to go to your desk and draw what you're thinking about right now. Because once you write or draw, that relieves your working memory of what you're holding in your head about that text. And once you've relieved your working memory, it enables you to work with that idea and think about it and play with it and go a little deeper with it. Okay, so I'm coming back to the importance of oral language and building discussion. Gosh, there's so many great things that I bumped into when thinking and planning, but this might be my favorite. I'm going to print this out and put it next to me on my desk. It was too big to put the whole document in our presentation. So I just, this is from the English Language Learners Success Forum. So this is great support, not just for English language learners, but yes, especially So these are teacher talk moves. So if a student gives you a correct response, here are some things that you could be thinking about. What is a useful move? And then examples of moves that are going to get kids to the place that we need to with scaffolding to have those really rich conversations about complex text. And I just read, there's so many resources and tools. And so oral language getting lost because it doesn't have a bright, pretty color. But I also worry about this differentiated instruction tab that we need to be, how are we doing for time, Donna? Am I going, oh goodness, okay. Whoo, thank you. So Tim Shanahan has a great article about complex text. It's a nice tool for you to look at and think about. This is, oh, I'm almost done. This video is everything. If you are a person who has to see it to understand it, this video from Achieve the Core is a kindergarten read aloud. It is a work of art. And this is the video link. Okay. Oh, and this was just an example from my first grade classroom of students engaging with text and writing about it. So good to think. I didn't think I was going to have enough. Okay. Stop share.
Thank you, Jen. That was wonderful. You gave us so much to think about. I am just going to go back and share my screen quickly. I'd like to allow us a couple of minutes for some question and answer. So Jen, thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to my DESE colleague, Susan Kazeroid, who is also content support lead, and her and Jen will do a couple of minutes on question and answer, and then we'll be closing out.
Great. Thank you, Donna. Jen, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us and your expertise. Just a couple questions. Given the importance of all students having access to complex texts, what are some ways you can recommend scaffolding the text for early learners?
Excellent. So, it starts in the heart of conversation, right? So we have to start and enable students to understand and know that they're thinkers and their thinking matters, and giving them the tools to communicate what their thinking is. And then perhaps you're going to pre-teach the vocabulary because you think that might hang up the kids with understanding the text. Maybe we're going to break it into chunks and take it bit by bit, or and then the other piece are text sets, right? So sometimes we bootstrap text. So we do a 2 grade level above read aloud, but then the books that we're reading with them are on the same content. And that read aloud builds some background knowledge and allows them to open and understand the lower levels, but same content that can also be complex.
Great, thank you. You kind of answered the second question, which was around the levels in read aloud, what kind of books you should choose for read alouds.
So I love my literature, and that's what I choose to read every night before I go to bed. But again, in the short time that we have in public schools, nonfiction texts are really going to expose children to deep vocabulary. The sentences in nonfiction texts have more ideas in each sentence. So sentence structure, vocabulary, and building content knowledge and understanding in a content area. So as much nonfiction text as we can get in, I think is a really great and important way to go.
Great, thank you. And that brings us right to 4:15. So Donna, I'll turn it back over to you. Maybe Donna will come back on. Catherine has just dropped a link to the survey into the chat. We really appreciate hearing your feedback. Donna, I'll let you go. I wasn't sure there.
Thank you, Susan. No, sorry, anyway, thank you. So Jen, thank you so much again. What a great session today. Before we close, just want to bring to mind 2 quick points. First, please be sure to check out the top resources page that we mentioned at the beginning of the session today for the previous mass literacy webinars, and also to know where this one will be for next week as well. Like I said earlier, the foundational skills one is already there. Second, we have a one-pager that offers ways to access the guide. Both of these are included in the links doc that was shared with you earlier in the presentation. We need to hear from you. Your feedback, what makes our work just better and stronger. So please take a few minutes to complete the survey. The link is being dropped in the chat for you right now. You can click on it right now so you have it to complete after the webinar ends. You will also receive a survey reminder in the email tomorrow with the survey link tomorrow right around this time actually, and you can complete it that way too. We appreciate your being here with us today, and thanks to Jen for sharing. We hope you can all be with us next Thursday, March 11th at 3:30 for the session on fluent word reading. If you have any further questions or comments, please submit them to the Mass Literacy Contact Us box, and that link is being dropped in the chat for you as well. This concludes today's webinar. Take good care, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.